Hey, it's me. I'm back for Mrs. Wilson Reed's Mystery of History, Volume 2. Today we are on Lesson 70. So sit back, relax, listen, and let's see if we can learn a little something. The Great Khans and the Mongolian invasion of China. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Great Khans of the Mongolian Empire, but they were something to be feared in the late Middle Ages, especially Genghis Khan. With notable ruthlessness, he and his descendants conquered the largest part of the world ever conquered in history. It was larger than the Roman Empire, larger than the lands of Alexander the Great, and larger than the empire of Charlemagne. First, let me tell you about the spread of the Mongols under the terrible Genghis Khan. Then we'll look at his grandson, Kublai Khan. He was a much nicer guy. The terrible Genghis Khan. In the late 1100s, when Genghis Khan was just 13 years old, he became the chief of his tribe in Mongolia. Mongolia is a region located north of China and is made up of rolling plains and desert. The people of Mongolia are especially known for living in felt tents called yurts. A yurt is easy to pack up and travel with. These traveling homes were needed because the Mongolian people would typically follow their herds across the plains and the Great Gobi Desert. Their herds included camel, sheep, ponies, goats, and oxen. The Mongolian diet consisted mainly of meat and milk products from these animals. Isn't that like, what's that diet that everybody does? Never mind, I can't even think about it. In a short time, Genghis Khan's rule spread to other tribes in Mongolia. He was called Lord of all the peoples, dwelling in felt tents. Okay. What seemed to make Genghis the lord of the Mongols was the way he pulled the wandering people together to form an army. He was a gifted military leader and trained his army in the skills of siege attacks. Much like the Vikings we studied earlier, the Mongols mastered the use of the surprise attack against their enemies. This unfair method of warfare is one reason why the Mongols were so feared. They learned how to use storm ladders, fill moats with sandbags to cross them, and protect themselves with giant shields. And when the Great Khan's army took to crossing the deserts, each river took 2 horses, one to ride and one as a spare. Imagine the sound of all those horses' hooves thundering across the plains. As far as Genghis Khan was conquered, all methods of warfare, okay, let me read that sentence again. As far as Genghis Khan was concerned, all methods of war were fair as long as he won. He had the ambition of conquering the entire world, claiming he was led by the eternal blue sky. The sky was thought to be the highest supernatural power according to an old Mongolian religion. Genghis Khan had no problem ordering his men to slaughter the inhabitants of whole cities if they resisted his rule. And that is what happened under the horrific reign of Genghis Khan. He laid waste to town after town, destroying anyone and everything in his path. As harsh as this sounds, Genghis Khan was amazing in what he accomplished. He may have been tough, but he was equally brilliant. First, to stabilize his own people, he established the first Mongol code of laws, called the Yasa. Then he went on a conquering spree that led to one of the largest empires in history. Genghis started in China by capturing the Hisa Empire. From there, he gained the Qin Empire in northern China. He had the city of Peking by 1215, Karakai Empire by 1218, and parts of the Muslim Persian world by 1220. If that wasn't enough, Genghis Khan sent some of his generals to capture armies in the south of Russia. They also overthrew the army of a Russian princess in 1223. Considering the amount of land he gained, which was eventually 2/3 of the known world, it appeared that Genghis Khan and the Mongols were unstoppable. For many years, they practically were. Of course, in time, the great Genghis Khan died. He willed his empire to his 4 sons. But as we often see in history, they weren't made of the exact same stuff as Genghis. The empire was shaky for a while. The wide expanse of the empire made it difficult to rule. But then entered the grandson of Genghis. His name was Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan was also a conqueror. With the wrath of Genghis in his blood, Kublai Khan leveled a few cities of his own, taking the rule of the Mongols farther than ever before. By 1264, he made Peking, China, his capital. By 1276, Kublai's forces took the capital of the Song dynasty. By 1279, all of China was under Kublai Khan's rule. Keep in mind, the Mongols were the first outsiders to ever take China from the Chinese. Can you imagine how the Chinese felt about this? With the Song dynasty destroyed and humiliated, Kublai started the Yuan dynasty. It remained in place from 1260 to 1358. In addition to China, Kublai Khan spread his rule to Burma and Cambodia. He tried to get Japan in 1274, but was defeated by the samurai. I'm sure you remember them. Kublai tried to attack Japan again in 1281. However, the Japanese believed that a divine wind, or a kamikaze, spared them from a typhoon when a typhoon hit Kublai Khan's men and destroyed their fleet. What Kublai Khan learned was that his large army of men and horses weren't very effective on the sea. Horses don't swim very well. In the end, what Kublai Khan did have was land stretching from the Yellow Sea in Eastern Asia to the borders of Europe in the west. This vast territory included China, Korea, Mongolia, Persia, Iran, Turkestan, Armenia, and parts of Burma, Vietnam, Thailand, and Russia. Knowing this, think with me what it might mean for one man to have exposure to all these different cultures. Do you think it might broaden his perspective just a little? Well, in the case of Kublai Khan, that is exactly what happened. It seems that Kublai Khan found he was intrigued by all the different religions and peoples he came across. And so, unlike his grandfather, Kublai Khan became a much more thoughtful Mongol. This is probably the best demonstrated by the way he invited outsiders into his court. He employed Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and followers of Confucius. He brought in thinkers, doctors, and writers. As a result, art and science flourished. Though Kublai Khan did not outwardly confess Christianity, he wanted more Christian missionaries in his empire, so he invited Franciscans and Dominicans to his capital. I imagine that St. Francis and St. Dominic would have been thrilled to know how far their followers took the message of the gospel. John of Montecorvio was just one of Franciscans we know by name who built a church in Kublai Khan city. He had many converts. I'm not doing really great with all these names, so just don't tell anybody. As significant as that was, probably the most famous foreigner to be entertained by Kublai Khan was Marco Polo. An Italian merchant. Personally, I find Marco Polo so interesting that I'm saving the next lesson for him, which I'll read in a minute. Although the Mongols were savage in their approach to gaining land, they probably did more to bridge the gap between the East and the West than any others before them. With the Mongolian Empire being so broad and so diverse, it exposed the people to unknown customs. The West learned of paper money, gunpowder, and the compass. The East learned of Christ and the Church. To some degree, this cultural diversity also proved to weaken the Mongolian Empire. The cultures under the Great Khans were so different that there was little unity or bonding between them. A few notable Mongol leaders rose from time to time, like Tamerlane, who was one of the cruelest leaders that ever lived, and Shah Jahan, the man who built the famous Taj Mahal in India. But slowly, the Mongols weakened, and eventually the Chinese completely took back their homeland. But that is another lesson. I think it's enough to absorb the strength of the Mongolian Empire that all started with the incredible personality and vision of the great and terrible Genghis Khan.